Hi, this is Joe Sallen with the Sallen Coefficient, making the most of your time at the table. The Sallen Coefficient is an entertainment efficiency rating that's going to help you decide whether or not a game is going to be worth your time. I specifically look at the amount of decisions you're going to make, the strategy, the tactics that's going to go into it, and compare that to the amount of time it's going to take you to learn and then play the game. So, is it worth your time? We're going to figure out. Today we're talking about the quest for El Dorado. This is a Spiel des Jahres nominated game. It's a deck building game in which players are racing to El Dorado. It is designed by the prolific Dr. Rainer Knizia. Now, when I think of a Dr. Rainer Knizia game, almost always the first thought that comes to my head is some sort of an auction. Now, unless you're playing Tigris and Euphrates, which in a way its battles are kind of an auction, you're going to be playing mostly auction games if you play his library. The thing is, though, Quest for El Dorado, to me, doesn't have really anything about it that specifically makes it stand out as a Dr. Rainer Knizia game, except for the name on the front cover. Now, instead, what we have is a simple deck-building game in which players are going to be encountering the same exact offering of cards every single game to be able to purchase and add to their deck. But what's going to change in each game is the specific route that you are taking and the specific map that you are playing on to eventually get to El Dorado. These maps that are included in the game, like the one that I showed you in my How to Play video, which is only 60 seconds long, if you have the time for that, go check it out. In that video, you could see a specific map that's recommended for starting players. Now, there are 3 different levels of difficulty and 6 different other maps included in the game. And it also includes rules and suggestions for how to build your own maps. So it really does have that sort of like replayability in terms of the board itself and the way that you will be moving through that board, the way that you sort of make decisions of how you're building your deck to then most efficiently move throughout the board. And that's really what this game is about. It's about understanding what's in the path ahead of you. You can see the entire path from the beginning of the game, and you're able to decide, like, okay, should I build lots and lots of green machete symbols because this is a really heavy jungle map, and there are ways for me to be able to avoid most obstacles if I can use those green ones to maybe go the longer path, but a way that's much better, easier for me, because one of the games that's really heavy that I absolutely love that makes me think of this is Lewis and Clark. It is a extremely crunchy, difficult, movement-based game that El Dorado takes at least some of its sort of the way that you're designing an engine to be able to move through the jungle and get to El Dorado first. Now, it's also like Lewis and Clark, a race game, and that means that frequently you'll be able to see several turns in advance whether or not you're going to be really in competition for the win, and it can be a little bit disheartening, but I want to also say the positive things about being able to see where you stand. In a lot of deck building games, your standing in the game is murkied by all of the points being stacked into your deck. One of my favorite games of all time, Dominion, is an absolutely excellent game, but you never know really how well you're doing unless you're counting everybody's points. You never know what's going to happen until everybody counts their points there at the end of the game, especially if you add in a lot of different expansions that have sort of like non-traditional scoring ways. Anyhow, what ends up happening is for new players, it's very difficult to gauge when is that right time to start building yourself towards the points in the game. And here in El Dorado, you don't have to make that decision. You're just trying to most efficiently construct your deck so that you can pass through all the obstacles that are going to be in your way. You're also able to cull your deck, but those spots tend to be out of the way, and it's kind of interesting, like you can immediately teach people like, this spot over here lets you get rid of a card. It's good to go do that. That's why they put it out of the way. Anyhow, it really helps people learn that it's about building an efficient deck and trimming that deck, because a lot of new players, especially in playing Dominion, will not realize that just because you have an extra buy doesn't mean you should use it, especially if you're buying a poor card, because that's just making your deck less efficient. Anyhow, the biggest thing about El Dorado being a very great game to teach to new players is that you can physically see where you are at in the game at all times. Like, it is like watching a loading bar get from the beginning to the end, and that makes it sound really boring, but it's not, because that loading bar has all these different obstacles, and it really does feel like, a bit of a tropes through the jungle, and the thing is, other players block you, and you seem to almost always sort of congest up, especially the way that the games that I've played have very well-designed races that are included in the pre-constructed designs, and they almost always have like sort of choke points that make those players sort of funnel in together. You don't always have to do that, but it just becomes this really hilarious, like, are you seriously not going to move this turn? You're right in my way. There have been times when it's just been really funny. You're able to interact with other players entirely because of where you're at. So you're never going to be like hurting other players in this specific game, but you're going to be still like getting in their way, and that tends to really result in a lot of uproarious laughter. So I really appreciate that you can see how you're faring in the game, and that's what makes this, in my opinion, the deck builder to teach people how to play a deck building game. Dominion I absolutely love, but it is 10 cards that are not going to be present in the next game that you play, and it is also 10 cards they have to learn, and it's just a lot of, like I said, cloudy. How well am I actually doing? It's not really clear. In El Dorado, it makes a lot of those sort of heuristics very clear, very solid from the very beginning, and results in El Dorado being an excellent starting entry point for people that are brand new to deck building. So get this game if you have a lot of people that you're teaching how to play deck builders, and you have other deck builders that you really like. So, where does it specifically fare on the Sallen Coefficient scale? Actually, the Sallen Coefficient, in my personal opinion, happened to completely align in this game, because one of the reasons that I love it so much is just how incredibly efficient it is as entertainment. Every single decision that you make is very clear, very, it's not tough to really decide to see your options. It is tough to weigh what's the right one, but that never seems to lock players up. I also like that every single card in the game is useful to you because you can spend 2 cards for $1. Now that just means more choices, even though that seems to never really lock players up. So I mean, you've got a deck builder here that has all kinds of really great choices, and I would say the Sallen Coefficient then, that's one of the reasons the Sallen Coefficient for this game is an 8, and my personal opinion for it is also an 8. A great, great game. Now, had they included an extra set of sort of variant deck building cards, so that way you could build a deck differently and you could sort of assess not just the map, but also what cards are available, that would have definitely raised my personal rating, though it wouldn't have really affected the Sallen Coefficient because the amount of efficiency you're getting from the game is going to be the same whether or not you're playing with a different set. It's more about legs than it is about actual entertainment efficiency in that game, the decisions per minute. So anyhow, a great, great game to get people started on, an excellent deck building game. I highly recommend it. It happens to be very cheap as well. I don't think it really feels like a cheap game, but the price tag on it's only like fraction like $35, whereas a normal game will be like $60. I think that it's definitely worth that, and it's one that you should definitely check out if you're at all interested in teaching people simple deck builders, or if you're interested in getting into a deck builder yourself. So anyhow, that's the Sallen Coefficient for the quest for El Dorado. Dr. Reiner Knizia putting himself back on the map with a game that seems nothing like anything else he's made, but also very different from other deck builders I've ever played. Thanks for watching the Sallen Coefficient video. Check out my other how to play videos in 60 seconds. Those are really entertaining for me to try to make and try to somehow get in to 60 seconds. They usually take a lot of takes and a lot of outtakes. Man, I could make a 25-minute video with all my 1-minute video outtakes. Anyhow, check out my other videos if you really like the Sallen Coefficient. Please also like, subscribe, comment, and